A one-shot comic is one story contained in a single issue. Now, if you're trying to get the attention of some big publishers, it's really important to show that you can tell a great story in a single issue. Let me show you how to write an amazing indie one-shot comic. Welcome back, friends. Welcome back. When I talk to a lot of indie comic book creators and I'm asking them about their story or what they're working on or their book, a lot of times they're telling me these really grandiose stories, like an X-Men type team or superhero team. They got all these characters. They have all like these long development arcs. And a lot of it's like really good. I like cool stuff. Okay. But if you're going to make a book, your first book, you should probably be able to do it in one issue. You just got to tell me one great story in that first issue for your first book. And again, if you're looking to get the attention of bigger publishers, saying like, you know, I'm just going to be indie forever, or I want to be able to get the attention of one of the bigger publishers, a Dynamite or a Black Horse, or, you know, of course, the big two, Marvel and DC. But if you're just trying to get the attention of anyone, the first thing that you want to be able to do is be able to tell a really good self-contained story, a one-shot comic. Really important to know how to do this. So I have 5 amazing tips that will help you tell a really good one-shot comic with your indie book. Tip number 1, know what you want to say. This is so important. So many people are looking to make comic books because, well, they have a love to make comic books. Let me say that first. But they want to make a comic book that sells. And first I'm going to say is, who doesn't? I mean, no one wants to make books and no one wants to read. You want to make books and you want the books to be sold and you want to find a fan base that likes what you do. But it's really important that you're telling a story that means something to you. You got to tell a story that's in your heart. So there are times where there are trends going on in the industry. Like at one point, of course, it was all zombies or it's all superhero teams. And someone says like, well, this is what's selling right now. I'm going to do this because that's what's selling. If you don't have a story in your heart you can tell about that faction, I would say don't do it. But it's okay if someone's saying, well, what's really selling right now is superhero teams and all the companies are looking for a superhero team book. If you can find a good story that you can tell in that genre, then by all means go for it. But if you can't find a story that works for you, that makes sense, that you can't tell, then I would say don't do it. Tell a story that means something to you. Because when getting into this, you're going to be living with this for a long time. You know, making a book, being in the indie world, creating a comic. So it's really important that you're telling a story that means something to you, that you know that you're saying something you want to say, that you have a unique take on saying what's to be said. Because if you don't, you're going to fall into a pattern of just cliches. If you say like, well, what's selling this week? They're looking for superhero team books. Okay, what are other books doing? I'm just going to do that. And when you find yourself in that deadly space, that cliche space, it will kill whatever you're doing. And it will be ignored because who wants to read the same thing over and over again? You have to find your unique voice. And I know everyone out there has a unique voice for telling your story. So the second part of that is this. Knowing what you want to say, the second part is, how do you want to say it? Now, do you want to tell it in a really action-oriented way? Do you want it to be comedy? Do you want it to be horror? And so here's how you know if you're achieving that. If it's a comedy book, then you should be laughing. If it's supposed to be horrifying, you should be scared. Like you should look at your pages and your writing and say, wow, that's deep. Wow, that's funny. And if you're not getting that feeling from yourself, then it's probably not working the way you want it to. But it's really important. Know what you want to say and how do you want to say it. Tip 2. Before we get to this tip, I'm going to assume that you've already had you figured out what you want to say. You know how you want to say it. You've probably written tons of notes. You have your idea, your characters. You have all this stuff laid out. So now we got to get into the actual mechanics of actually making a comic book. So now comes time to writing a script. So writing your script as a one-shot. Here's the tip. You have to be conscientious of your page count. So being conscious of your page count is so important. Because now we're taking all these ideas that you have, this great idea you have, and I know it's great, and now we have to put it into script form. So you have to take this great idea and tell one story, a beginning, middle, and end, within 22 pages. So the next thing we have to consider is our page count. So when we talk about page count, we're really only talking about one side of a physical page. So when you count a book, or count the pages in the book, we're saying if it's 24 pages, it's really actually only 12 physical pages, and one side is considered a page. So it's 12 physical pages, but one physical page is 2 sides. So in the industry, when it comes to printing, they will often call the page count, they call it a side. So you're going to buy sides. You buy your sides for every book. So if you say, well, it's 22 pages, but I just went to 23, and people say, I'll just add another page on, that's going to be an issue. Because when it comes to printing, pages are sold in 4-page increments. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. So those other 2 pages, because you get 22 pages of story, and the other 2 pages are pages that are what I call business pages in the book. So you only have 22 pages to tell your amazing one-shot story. So in writing your script, you have to be conscientious of those pages. How do I tell this great, fantastic story in these 22 pages? And so now it comes time for, what do I really want to say and what's really important, and being conscious of this story. The bad thing to do is to say, well, I wrote 50 pages and now I just got to cut it down to 22. So if you're just starting, I understand that's a way of getting your mind to wrap around what you want to do, but typically that's going to be a problem. And I would say this, if that's where your head is, I just wrote and I wrote 40 pages and I got a great 40 pages, okay, fine. But now you may have to go back and rewrite, not just take pages. You can't just take pages out, is what I'm getting to. You have to actually write it for the 22 pages. So if you wrote 40 great pages and you got this great one-shot story, but you know you're only going to be able to do a 22-page book, it's bad business for you to just try to take pages out and just try to collapse it. You may have to go back and actually rewrite more than half of it to make it work within those 22 pages. So I'll tell you this story, because you know I'm full of stories. The movie, Once Upon a Time in America, they wrote a script that was for 3 hours and 30 minutes long. Actually, the movie's closer to 4 hours. But I'm going to say 3 hours and 30 minutes long. They wrote a script for that amount. They took it to the studio. The studio approved a 3 hour and 30 minute movie. They went out and shot a 3 hour and 30 minute movie. They edited a 3 hour and 30 minute movie. They presented this 3 hour and 30 minute movie to the studio and say, look at our great 3 hour and 30 minute movie. And the studio said, this is great. Now make it 2 hours. And so what happened was they just started basically trying to yank things out of the story to condense it to 2 hours. That is a recipe for disaster, because you're just trying to take things out to condense it. You're taking out, well, where do I take this out? What do we take out? How do we cut it? Where do we cut it? And the movie was a disaster. And the movie came out, it was a flop. The director, he actually had a nervous breakdown. He died like early in life, so to speak. He said that after basically investing his whole life into the art of making that film, and then the studio basically just yanking the guts out of it and destroying it. They say it took years off of his life. Like he really went down physically. Now, again, like 5 years later, the cool version came out, but it took a toll on his life. To spend 4 years of your life every day working on something and making it a masterpiece, and then have people gut it for commerce and just, but you get the idea. So that comes to tip number 3. Make sure your pages count. So, really important. You only have 22 pages, and you have things that got to get done within these 22 pages. So understand it's this. So it's like, this is what I have, and this is what's got to get done. So you still have to tell a full story. Character introduction, conflict, resolution. You got to do that. Character introduction, rising action, conflict, falling action, resolution. So if you want an example of a great one-shot story, there's nothing better than Amazing Fantasy 15. When Stan Lee wanted to make Spider-Man, the editor said no.
I got down to Spider-Man. Spider-Man. It just sounded dramatic. So, okay, I had my hero, I had his power, his name. So armed with all that wonderful material, those great ideas, I ran into my publisher's office and I told him the reaction he gave me. Stan, that is the worst idea I have ever heard. And I couldn't get Spider-Man out of my system. So we were about to kill a magazine. I think it was called Amazing Fantasy. Just to get it out of my system, I put Spider-Man in Amazing Fantasy, featured him on the cover, forgot about it. A month later, all the sales figures came in. My publisher came racing into my office. Stan, you remember that character we both loved so much, Spider-Man? He said, let's do him as a series.
And again, the first story of Spider-Man is a one-shot story. So speaking of amazing fantasies, it would be amazing if at this point you liked and subscribed the video, you hit the hype button, and if you would buy me a coffee. So I have a new buy me a coffee button in my description below. I would appreciate it. It helps me be able to do this, and I can do it more consistently. Because, 'cause I'm always managing things and trying to get the videos done. But if you buy me a coffee, it will make things so much easier for me. I would appreciate it. Thank you very much. Tip number 4. Put a period on your story. So important. So you're telling a story, and a lot of times people say like, well, I want to leave a cliffhanger to get people to want to tune back in and want to see more. The best way to get people to want to see more is to satisfy the reader at the end of a book. And the best way to satisfy the reader is to put a period on the end of a story. Tell your story. Character introduction, conflict, resolution. Tell a full story. Put a period on it. Come to an end. And so you can do that in a way that the audience is satisfied, they're satiated, and they want to see more. So again, Amazing Fantasy 15. The story ends, and in the last panel, Stanley he says something along the lines of now I remember it says teen. Let's look it up. The end of it says the last panel is, and so a legend is born, and a new name is added to the roster of those who make the world of fantasy the most exciting realm of all. And so that's the end. And then at the bottom, and again, this is so funny because, like you said, the story we find out now is that they're going to kill Amazing Fantasy. This is the last issue. But it says, be sure to see the next issue of Amazing Fantasy for the further amazing exploits of America's most different new teenage idol, Spider-Man. So it does end. He actually ends at him walking away Spider-Man walking away in the dark. And they end the story, period. Story's done. And then he does give you a little bit saying like there's more story to be told about Spider-Man in the future. But it's important. Put a period on the end of your story. Make sure it ends. Tell a great story, come to an end, and then you can give people just a little bit of, there's so much more to tell in the story that we can tell, but you are satisfied with what you saw so far. Tip number 5. Do not use your book as an info dump. It is not time to do that. I mean, you should never use a comic as an info dump. So you're going to exposition, your story, but you don't want to dump information into your book. There are things that you can be said sometimes in 1 or 2 lines that make people understand what you want to say, but you don't want to be dumping things in your book. Don't do that. People sometimes feel like, well, how would the audience know unless I tell them? So the key is this. You don't have to tell them everything. You just have to tell them enough. So, example, you want to say that the character doesn't get along with their mom. And a friend says, well, why don't you go home and tell your mom? Like she would care. And they say, why do you say that? You got to know my mom. Well, maybe you shouldn't know her. So something like that you can do in a panel. And that tells you everything. You don't have to go into the whole backstory of like, well, when he was a kid, she beat him with a stick, and she ignored him, and she partied all the time. All that stuff doesn't have to be told in your one shot. That will let the audience know, that he doesn't care for his mother, and that she's not reliable, and that's enough that you can tell. So that gets across, and you can do that in a panel on a page. You don't have to do a whole information dump. Bonus tip. Sometimes it's easier in starting your story inside of a conflicting moment. Sometimes you can show the hero, if it's a hero book, they're already in the middle of a fight, fighting for their life, and they're kind of narrating about how to get myself into this, and then they'll go back after a couple pages, go back to 1 month earlier, and then you kind of build a story from that. And then that's kind of cliche, but starting in a conflict helps get the reader engaged faster, kind of hooking them in, and as long as, again, you can do things. You don't want to be cliche, but you can do things that have been done as they call a device, and you can do it as long as you're doing it again, that you're telling your story in your way, and that's really important, because how many times have we seen a romantic comedy? Boy meets girl, boy likes girl, girl doesn't like boy, boy and girl falls in love, boy and girl break up. Boy and girl get back together and live happily ever after. I mean, you've seen that movie. I've seen that movie 1,000 times. But we keep watching those movies because it's the way they're told. So when someone tells a story in a really good way, it pulls at our heartstrings and we want to watch it. So as long as you're telling your story in a unique way, I mean, you can use a device, you can use quote-unquote cliche, but you want to make sure that you're telling it in your way. So it's helpful. It doesn't have to start this way, but if you start within a conflict, it kind of makes it easier to hook your reader into it. Hope these tips help. You liked and subscribed, and you bought me a coffee. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I love you guys. See you in the next video.